40% of executives fail within the first 18 months.
We're going to go through 10 misconceptions about leadership.
Just happens to be the most important applied discipline in the world.
Who owns leadership?
It's an unregulated environment.
Leadership is about charisma. So the misconception is that if you have personal magnetism, dash, and style, you are a leader.
It's an amplifier, so it can lead to manipulation.
It can also lead to bad hires. And that's one that I'll call out, is about seniority.
Time in grade mentality diametrically opposes a merit-based system.
People will say, oh yeah, I've been doing this for 17 years. Yeah, maybe you were doing that exact thing for 17 years and you never improved after the year 1 or 2 or 5. This one's hard for me, Tim, because I like winning.
I know.
You've got to win trust. You've got to win respect. Those are the things that by winning will enable you to win in the marketplace. C.S. Lewis said, bad philosophy needs to be answered. Welcome back, everyone, to The Leader Factor. I'm Junior, here with my co-host, Dr. Tim Clark, Oxford PhD and CEO of Leader Factor. Tim, how you doing?
Hey, doing great. I want to go back to what you just said, though, that C.S. Lewis quote.
Yeah.
Bad philosophy needs to be answered. Why? I'll tell you why. Because it turns into action. It turns into behavior. It turns into decisions. And those all lead to consequences. That's why. So we got to finish that. It needs to be answered because we go and behave based on that.
Yeah.
And if the philosophy's bad or wrong or false, we're in trouble.
Yep.
That's why.
You think there's bad philosophy in leadership?
There's a lot.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
Have you seen any recently?
Always.
Always.
It's not just recent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the effort of in today's episode, I suppose, is to answer some bad philosophy. So we're going to go through 10 misconceptions about leadership that are not just misleading, they're dangerous. Because as you said, philosophy is upstream from our behavior. And if we have bad philosophy, it's going to inform poor action.
That's right.
So we've got to tweak what's up here philosophically so that we've got the right software running so that we can make good decisions.
And leadership just happens to be the most important applied discipline in the world.
Yeah. And thankfully, for the most important applied discipline in the world, we have a governing body on leadership and a lot of clarity about what good leadership is, right?
It's an unregulated environment.
Who owns leadership?
No one owns leadership. That's a very interesting thing, because if you go to a university and you say, I want to study leadership, who's in charge of leadership here? Is there a department of leadership? No, there isn't. Now, different disciplines will claim it, right? Social science will claim it. Maybe engineering will claim it. Maybe business will claim it. Maybe, right? They all have claims upon it. But leadership is above all of it's cross-disciplinary in nature. And so no one owns it, no one claims it. So that's pretty interesting from an academic standpoint. But then if you look at the leadership literature, it's massive. It's unregulated. 99% of it you shouldn't read. So you have to be very discriminate. How can you do that? Right? Should we set up a regulatory body? That's not going to help. So this is a bit of a dilemma.
Yeah. To the regulatory body question, my knee-jerk reaction was like, yeah, we should. And then very quickly I was like, no, we shouldn't.
No.
That's a bad idea.
That's a bad idea.
So why do we think we can weigh in? Well, we've got an interesting vantage point in the domain of leadership. This is what we do all day, every day for many years. We've had the opportunity to work with many organizations, some small, most large, different cultures and geographies, different industries. And we also have a lot of data. We gathered tremendous amounts of data through individual surveys, multi-rater, org-wide stuff. Just this week, I was processing a whole bunch of leadership 360s and emotional intelligence 360s for a Fortune 500 company. That's an interesting seat to be in, to be able to go through all of the data, look at all of the results, see the patterns, and we've been able to do that for years. So I'm double checking everything. I'm making sure that things are good. We're prepping for debriefs. Going through this data, I can see some patterns. Right? And so much of what is valuable in the area of leadership and in anything really is pattern recognition.
Mm-hmm.
You've often said that we are in the business of pattern recognition. So hopefully we've been able to recognize some patterns and we can share them with everybody out there. You can use us as a pre-filter for a lot of the leadership stuff that's out there, be it good, bad. We can help guide you in a direction that we think is useful. And hopefully we've been able to gain some credibility over time based on our experience.
And Junior, I don't mean to disparage, for example, basic research or original research that is done in the academy. It's very, very important, very useful. But what we have to recognize that with basic research, that's not consumable for the practitioner, right? And so basic research has to develop. And if you just look at the difference between, and I hope this doesn't seem too technical, but if you just look at the difference between descriptive statistics and inferential statistics, descriptive statistics tell us probably 99% of what we need to know. We're able to identify patterns. We don't need to get into sophisticated statistical analysis most of the time. So what am I saying? That most of what we need to know about leadership comes out of the general patterns that we are able to observe. That's what I'm saying. Does that make sense? So we don't need to get, if we go down into the research, we get lost pretty fast. And so we need to be able to translate for practitioners, people who are in the business of leading every day in the trenches.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful that we have you on the podcast because you help bridge that gap between theory and practice. You're in both places. So you can help us understand the theory, you can help us understand the research, and you've also worked with, I don't know how many leaders, many, and can provide unique insight. So let's start with the first misconception, which is this one right here. Leadership is about charisma.
Oh, this is a good one.
So the misconception is that if you have personal magnetism, dash, and style, you are a leader. What do you think?
Don't think so. First of all, let's understand that charisma is not necessarily a bad thing. But to begin with, it's a secondary trait. It's not a primary trait. It'll never be a primary trait. Primary traits relate to character and competence. Charisma is a secondary trait. It doesn't relate to those things directly. It's not derivative of those things directly. So it's over here. It's a nice to have, right? But charisma also can lead to unintended consequences that we don't like very much, because charisma means that you have a stronger or enhanced ability to influence others based on your presence, based on that magnetism that you have, that agreeableness, that charm. So that can be a good thing, but it depends on the direction of your influence. So that can cut both ways.
Yeah.
Right?
Charisma is an amplifier.
Yeah, it's an amplifier. So it can lead to manipulation.
Yeah.
It can lead to bad things.
Yeah. It can also lead to bad hires. And that's one that I'll call out. Charismatic applicants often do better in the interview process compared to those who are less so.
Mm-hmm.
And I had an example recently where I wasn't able to make a panel interview that our team was doing for a potential hire. The interview was recorded. It was an on-site interview. It is still recorded. So I was able to go back after the fact and see the interview. Now, the recording kicks out a transcript. This is the first time I've ever done this. I skimmed the transcript first. So before I even saw the person, heard the person, I read the interview.
You read it.
What does that do? Charisma does not come through in plain text.
So no nonverbals, no body language.
No, I didn't get any of that. I just read the interview.
Just the text, plain text, vanilla.
And that led me to a certain opinion. I watched the interview and the person was very charismatic. And that helped me see, oh, this is the difference. This is what can happen when there's charisma added to something that, just was what it was. And in this case, wasn't favorable. We ended up not moving forward with the candidate, but could have if we relied exclusively on just the presence and the magnetism or the charm, as you've said. So that's the misconception number one.
Very interesting.
That leadership is about charisma. And some people, the reason that it's a misconception is because there's some grain of truth in it. And we're going to talk about that at the very end of the episode, but you can see how people would get off track thinking about charisma this way.
Junior, I made a charisma hire 2 years ago.
Yeah. It was
it was a regrettable hire.
Shoot.
And I'll never do that again. I hope I'll never do that again.
Yeah.
But I have to confess, I got reeled in a little bit.
Yeah.
I got reeled in, and then that led to some willful blindness where I was not looking at other factors, other hiring criteria that I should have been. And I was blinded to that. That was my own fault. So there you go.
So charisma is an amplifier. It's a tool, but it is not foundational to leadership or trust. So let's move to the second one. Leadership is about eloquence. This one is similar to charisma in that eloquence is a tool. Eloquence is an amplifier. But why do we call this a misconception?
Because eloquence can also be very misleading, right? In an organization, more than eloquence, we are looking for clarity. Clarity is power. What do we need in an organization? We need alignment. What is alignment? Alignment is shared understanding and shared commitment. That comes out of clarity. Now, do we also need inspiration? Yes, we do. Do we need vision? Yes, we do. But we need clarity more than anything else to gain and maintain alignment. Yeah. So sometimes we confuse the two.
Yeah. I think about this a lot because I like words. You like words. And some words are beautiful, appropriate, but they're not as clear.
Right.
So very recently, we were doing some editing on an article that was going to get submitted. And what I found is that a lot of the editing process, and maybe this is obvious, but I thought it was interesting thinking back on it, is not additive, right? Mm-hmm. We're not adding a whole bunch of stuff. We're not trying to make things more flowery. We're trying to be more direct. We're trying to be impossible to misunderstand.
Right.
And so the criteria is not how beautiful can we make this piece or this communication or this email.
Yeah.
It's how clear can we be and how much alignment can we gain by using plain language. And it's not fun. I don't like it.
I think maybe that's part of the reason that people will stray away from clarity.
Yeah.
And they'll move to eloquence. Uh-huh. If you think about the tone and the voice that a corporation needs, it needs to be lean. It needs to be clear. It needs to be spare. It needs to be penetrating, right? We can't have ornate language. We can't risk ambiguity and confusion. So this is where we get off.
So true leadership communication is about clarity and substance, not style alone.
Yeah, and we can't fall prey to that temptation for false sophistication, which we can get sucked into sometimes.
It's not that difficult to get sucked in.
Yeah. And
you'll find this about many of these misconceptions. Leadership is about power. So this is our next one. If you're a CEO, you're a B-medal general, then you are a leader. Respond to that.
Well, again, what we're saying is that people this is another snare, and we take title and position and authority and power to be proxies of leadership. They're not. Now, sometimes the person that has these things can be a fantastic leader. So we do need to acknowledge this, but they are not proxies. We have to be very, very careful about this. Often people, they attain leadership positions, they assume titles, positions, and authority, but they got there not on their own merits. they're not competent, they're not good leaders, happens all the time.
So leadership is about competence, but there's a difference between earned authority through competence and positional authority. What's the difference?
Positional authority is the authority that comes to you by virtue of the position that you have, right? It comes with that. And then that's just a whole lot different than the authority that you get from your own merits, from what you've earned, from what you've achieved, from what you've accomplished on your own. And people know that.
Yeah. Well, if we put this plainly, would you follow someone because of their position or because of the way they lead? I don't think any of us have followed anyone blindly just because they had the title.
Right.
Those who earned our commitment did just that. They earned it through their competence. So if we think about how we behave and who we're willing to follow, I think that sheds light on some of these misconceptions and makes them a little bit more practical.
Junior, a big example here where people fall into the trap is with family businesses. Okay, let's just think about the pattern of family businesses. So the first generation, they're founders. You know, this is a bit of an oversimplification, but the pattern is still true. First generation are founders. Second generation, they build. They're builders. Usually in the third generation, the business often falls apart. That's where it collapses in the third generation. If you look at the pattern of family businesses, that's what happens. Why does this happen? Because we compromise in the third generation with leadership. And there becomes a sense of entitlement that, oh, well, you're the heir, so you get to lead the business, you get to run the business based on what? Based on who you are as a member of the family.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Based on your ancestry.
Yeah. Your lineage.
Your lineage. Okay.
We mix up earned authority and positional authority.
Yeah.
But it's not lost on people.
Right.
Right. Those who are in the organization and have to follow said person, they know.
They know.
And that's going to bear fruit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the organization will pay for it.
That's right.
True. Let's move to the next one. Leadership is about seniority.
Oh, I love this one.
I know. If you've outlived everyone else, you're a leader. Tell me about it.
This is the time in grade mentality. So it's the passage of time that somehow confers and anoints you to be a leader. This is it seems ridiculous, and yet this is alive and well in many organizations, especially if you're in the public sector.
Yeah.
Right? Where seniority also leads to a sense of entitlement. I've been here longer, therefore I should have this position.
Yeah.
Right? I should rise in authority. So this is the time in grade mentality, which is diametrically opposes a merit-based system.
Yep.
So the passage of time makes you a leader.
Yeah. Stephen Covey said something a long time ago. He said, some people have 20 years experience and other people have 1 year of experience repeated 20 times. I love that because I see it all the time. People will say, oh yeah, I've been doing this for 17 years. Like, yeah, maybe you were doing that exact thing for 17 years and you never improved after the year 1 or 2 or 5. So do we give deference to people just because they've been there for a while? Now, there's enough correlation across time that we see on average people generally will progress that I think that's why we do that.
It's an opportunity.
But it is certainly not causal.
No.
If you just stay there and have the time in grade, it does not produce competence on the other end by necessarily.
That's very true.
Okay, let's get to the next one. Leadership is about scale. So let's talk about that word, scale. If you work on the important issues of the day that affect many people, you are a leader. That's the misconception. Where did this one come from?
Well, I think there's a natural logic that says that if you have scalable impact, then that must equate to bigger, better leadership. And there's a logic to it that makes sense. But I think it's not, we have to be careful here because it's not necessarily about the scale of impact, but it's the quality of the impact. And so I think we have to be very, very careful here. Let me just throw out a statistic too, Junior. The University of South Carolina did a study on executive success or executive failure. 40% of executives fail within the first 18 months, right? 40%. That's a big number.
Yeah, it is.
Some people believe that wasn't even measured correctly and that it's more than that. And so I think we have to realize how difficult it is to lead, how difficult it is to lead when you get to higher levels of leadership. But then we start to discredit or kind of dismiss people who are leading at lower levels.
Mm-hmm.
And we think, oh, that's not as important because the scope and the scale are not as big. I just don't believe that's true.
Yeah. I've seen way too much to believe that that's true.
Yeah.
I've seen it over and over again. And I think scale's really easy to point to. And I think early on for me, I would see, wow, this person led this organization to $1 billion exit. And wow. And you would think, well, if they did that, then they've got to be a great leader.
Yeah.
And then I started meeting some of these people personally,
Mm-hmm.
having conversations, digging into the process,
Right.
peeling back the layers. And I kept peeling back layers and layers and layers. And I'm like, wait, where is this thing that I'm looking for? Where is the competence? Where's the strategy?
Right.
Where's this skill set that I thought you had that must have been necessary to get to this point? And I realized, oh, first of all, you didn't do this alone, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
There are a whole bunch of other people who contributed in different ways to get to this point. And maybe you contributed a little bit here, but what I attributed to you wasn't you. Oh, interesting. And in some cases, you had to point to luck and timing.
Yeah.
You had to point to capital availability. You had to look at all of these other variables. And pretty soon you would see that it wasn't necessarily true that they were a good leader. Now, some were. Some were phenomenal. Some went on, did the same thing again.
Mm-hmm.
Many weren't. And that's what you often see is if they're on some bus that's successful, they get off and then nothing happens after that.
Yeah.
You say, oh, okay, interesting.
Think about the phenomenal team leaders that you know that are exceptional at leading a team of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people.
Yeah.
And they may not gain more scale or scope of responsibility, but that's fine. They're phenomenal at what they do.
Yeah. Have you met leaders in your coaching and leadership who've achieved crazy scale who you'd never hire?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that says a lot, right?
It's a way to put it.
It is.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one. Leadership is about popularity. If everyone likes you, you're a leader. What about this?
Well, I think that this is dangerous. I think that this leads to compliance. I think that this leads to groupthink. I think that this leads to pressure to please. Because if you're intoxicated by the popularity, then you want to keep that going. Think about what that does to your judgment. You become impaired as a leader over time.
Yeah.
Especially if you're susceptible to that adulation.
Yep.
So I think this is a very dangerous one, actually.
Me too.
It's not benign at all.
No, I like the word dangerous. So I've got a quote in here from Oscar Wilde, popularity is the penalty of success. Talk about danger.
Yeah.
This is where there's so much nuance in these 10 because popularity will often come from success. And it's an adverse consequence most of the time,
That's right.
Not a good one.
That's right.
And so it's bad enough in that scenario, worse if that's what you're pursuing from the onset.
Yeah.
So popularity, not proxy for good leadership.
No, it's not.
Similar to it is the next one, that leadership is about fame. If you are known far and wide, you are a leader.
This is very related to popularity.
It is. This is reach, though.
Yeah.
So Just because people know you from all four corners of the earth does not mean that you're a leader. Although we get sucked into that too. It may seem obvious. It may seem so on the nose and self-evident, but yet here we are. It's a pattern that we have observed where people, because of someone's fame.
Yeah, this one, I think in almost every case is, well, you couldn't put a percentage to it, but it's a false proxy in so many ways. And I would steer away from it.
Yeah. One of the things that I love doing most is trying to go behind the scenes for those who have achieved fame and popularity. Some of them have very interesting stories that show the grind, right? The 10 years before the overnight success.
Mm-hmm.
Some achieve fame without that. So the fame is not, as you said, proxy for good leadership, but it still can be achieved through proper channels. That's what makes it so deceptive.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to go further. You have to unpack and see what of substance is actually there, knowing that I can't just use fame as a proxy indicator.
That's right. Yeah, you got to go beyond that. Junior, there's a good case study. I mean, I have to say, just learning about Sal Khan lately, the founder of Khan Academy, I have more and more respect for that gentleman. I really, really do. To learn that he began by tutoring his niece in math, and then to learn his life story about where he came from in Louisiana and his family situation and what he's done, incredible. So is he famous now? Yes, but this is where it really, we need to do some research and homework, and we need to delve into a person's life to really appreciate them and to be able to discriminate between a great leader and then someone that it's an apparition.
Yeah.
Really.
Shout out Sal Khan. We just made Brave New Words required reading for our whole company.
Yeah.
So it's,
he is a benevolent human being.
Certainly seems to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every indicator that I've seen points that way. Okay, let's go to the next one. Leadership is about winning. This one's good. If you've beaten your opponents, you're a leader.
Yeah.
What do you think about winning?
I think we need to replace winning with the concept of contribution, because winning can be dangerous, and winning often implies that we are punishing someone.
This is hard. This one's hard. This one's hard for me, Tim, because I like winning.
I know. But we have to be careful about this, don't we?
We do. No, it's just like the others. But that's where so much of the nuance is, because do good leaders win? How would you answer that question?
They do.
Yeah.
In what sense, though, right? In the marketplace?
Right, but like that's where the nuance lies.
Yeah.
Right? Because good leaders do win. They don't win all the time.
Yeah.
But on average, we're going to win.
Well, for example, take George Washington.
Yeah.
Right? He lost most of his battles.
Yeah.
In the Revolutionary War.
Is the wrong way to say it. Yeah. Yeah. Tell me more.
He did. He lost most of his battles, but he won the war. So ultimately, back to your point, you do have to win something.
Yeah.
You can't just you can't be losing all the time.
I like that. You've got to win something.
It's got to be a triumph.
Yeah. I like that a lot. So good leaders focus on, I'm going to say winning other things, and hopefully this doesn't sound just trite and cliche, but like you've got to win trust. You've got to win respect. You've got to win commitment. And the irony here, and maybe it's not even ironic, but those are the things that by winning will enable you to win in the marketplace, especially over a long time horizon. And that's one of those things, talking about the previous leaders that I've met who've had some success. I'm really interested in how they do over time. If you look longitudinally at the record, that's what's most interesting. Because if they can get a team to do it again, if they can continue to attract talent, if people stay with them, if they're able to continue to contribute for years and years to come, you have a pretty good idea that there's something good there.
Well, Junior, I love the fact that you said that. Those wins are the wins that really matter. It makes me think of the strategy professor at Columbia, Rita McGrath. She talks about transient competitive advantage. And the fact that if you're in a dynamic environment, the span of your competitive advantage will be shorter. It will be transient by nature. And so then how do you win over time? You win over time by developing the capacity to create competitive advantage over and over again. What does that go back to? It goes back to what you said, the trust, the commitment, to be the ability to collaborate, the ability to create an incubator of innovation. So you got to win at that level in order to win over time. Because even if you have something that's great, chances are the competitive advantage, it's not going to be forever.
Yeah. Let's move to the next one. Leadership is about wealth. If you have money, you're a leader. So Tim, I'd love to get your perspective on this one in particular, because people tend to have a fascination with money, and you go on the internet.
Is that a recent thing?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. In the last couple of years, for whatever reason, people started to get interested in money.
Just got fascinated in that.
So people have this fascination. You've had the opportunity to interact with a lot of high net worth individuals, a lot of wealthy leaders, we'll call them. Mm-hmm. What have you learned?
I've learned that, well, do you want to do a little pattern recognition?
Yeah.
Here's a pattern for you. And this is not true in all cases, and so I'll issue that caveat. But with wealth comes a corresponding decrease in empathy and humility. Not with everyone, but with a lot of folks. So please don't look at leadership as something that is dollar denominated. It will lead you astray.
I love that.
Right?
Yeah. Thank you for the insight. I always find that fascinating. You have the opportunity to interface with a lot of people that many don't get to talk to. It's not a piece of the world that a lot of people get to see. And so understanding some of the patterns from someone who is there is really useful. Let's go to the last one. Leadership is about, sorry, Tim, education.
Education.
If you are degreed and credentialed, you are a leader.
Mm-hmm.
What have you seen here? What are the patterns?
Same thing.
Yeah.
There's an elitism that can creep in. There's a false sense of superiority, right? The illusion of superiority that creeps in.
Yeah.
It's not true. And so again, if you have the opportunity for education, be grateful, use it to do good things, use it to make a contribution. And it may be, in fact, a resource that helps you be a better leader, but it doesn't equate into leadership in and of itself.
Yeah. What I've seen is that credentials are often door openers.
Yeah.
But after the doors open, what are you going to do? There still has to be work. There has to be performance. There has to be competence. And just because you have the few letters doesn't mean that you're going to be the world's greatest leader.
That's true.
In fact, sometimes it can be a hindrance or a crutch.
Very true.
If you lean on those too heavily. What you do with your education is way more important than the education you have. Okay, so those are the 10 misconceptions, things that aren't true leadership. I want to talk briefly to just one point. There's nuance here. Just because someone has achieved fame or achieved popularity or they win doesn't mean that because we're calling this a leadership misconception that they're poor leaders.
Right.
In fact, many leaders have a whole host of
these things.
The 10 things that we've described and are fantastic leaders.
But that's not why.
That's why it's deceptive.
Right.
And that's where we have to be incredibly perceptive. We have to look at the patterns and we have to look deeper than just this superficial glance at a person. Because it's easy. We want to categorize things as humans. We want to put things in buckets. It helps us make sense of the world. Mm-hmm. These proxy indicators we come up with naturally because there is some sort of truth to it. So every piece of this, all 10, there's some grain of truth in there, but that's what makes them so difficult. So I just want to say that as we conclude the 10, that just because we are calling these the top 10 leadership misconceptions does not mean that if someone possesses one of these traits that they're a poor leader.
No,
It's
not at all.
What we're saying.
Yeah, not at all.
A lot of these are amplifiers, as we discussed earlier, and they will amplify you for better or for worse, depending on the character behind you.
Very true.
So what is leadership about if it's not these 10 things? We will end on this slide. Leadership is about healthy influence. I like putting healthy before influence because it's not about just affecting things, affecting people. It's about affecting them for good. And there's a quote from a book that Tim wrote years ago called Leading with Character and Competence that I want to read as we wrap up. And then, Tim, I'd like you to share your final thoughts. Leadership is not an ethereal concept. It's not as cinematic as you might think. It's about one simple and profoundly human thing: influence. Yes, the essence of leadership is influence, but it's not just any kind of influence. It must aim at something good, something noble, something that builds, lifts, and makes better. In its purest sense, leadership is about influencing people to climb, stretch, and become. And it's not about the scope of your stewardship. Influencing the one is just as worthy as influencing the many. What do you think?
Well, I think it comes back to the antecedents of leadership, which are character on the one hand and competence on the other. I think those are the inescapable sources of leadership. These other things may have some correlation, as we see, and we don't discount them, but I think we have to go back to those original sources of character and competence. I think that's what it's all about.
Yep, I agree with you. So everyone, thank you for joining us in today's episode. We appreciate your attention. We recognize that you could spend it elsewhere. So when you dedicate a few minutes to consume content like this, we're grateful for it. Not least because it helps us get the message out to everyone else, and because our mission institutionally is to influence the world for good at scale. We can't do that with just a few hands. We need many hands like you to go out into the world and put these concepts into practice as you do already. So if you liked the episode, please subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and share with a friend. With that, we will catch you in the next episode. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Hey Leader Factor listeners, it's Jillian. If you liked the content in today's episode, we've compiled all of the concepts and slides into a downloadable resource for you. Click the link in the description or visit leaderfactor.com to explore our full content library. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next episode.